We agree that there's a crisis that needs to be addressed, but it needs to be addressed by Congress. The president doesn't have the authority to address this, and frankly, it's Congress's job to address it.
All right, and a Texas judge agreed, and essentially the president's $400 billion student relief program is now blocked, and some say dead on arrival, but not if the Justice Department has anything to do about it. Opposing this, and the judge's theory, and not a theory, the judge says based on something called the Constitution, that a president can't act unilaterally on things like this, that money matters must be decided by Congress. Let's go to Katie Cherkasky on this, a constitutional law attorney. Katie, who's right on this?
Well, this is a very interesting analysis from the judge in Texas. And basically, it was just a straightforward constitutional separation of powers analysis. And the judge made a very specific point to say that the ruling saying that this plan, the student loan forgiveness plan, was not constitutional, was based solely on separation of powers requirements and not about the public policy or the propriety of this plan. And I think that is a pretty strong argument. The Biden administration attempted to use existing legislation and creatively suggest that existing legislation, even though Congress at the time had not authorized it to be used for student loan forgiveness, could be interpreted to extend to that. And that is a big separation of powers question in my mind. And I think the judge was very clear about why there was a significant concern about extending that statute to something that did not seem to be contemplated at the time that it was enacted by Congress.
I'm not a lawyer. You're a good one. But I've watched a lot of law shows growing up, so I think I qualify as an expert. And the one thing that I found odd about this, in fact, you and I were kind of kidding about it, or at least I was, that the administration might have known full well that it was on slippery constitutional ground. But this would send a signal to his base and be very beneficial. There are probably a lot of ticked off students and some 20 million odd parents, and although that might be a little annoyed now that this isn't going to come, or for the time being not going to come to pass, but that was already baked into the cake. What do you think?
I think that's right. I think that most attorneys would agree that it is a stretch to creatively suggest that this statute that the Biden administration is using to essentially forgive student loan debt is being extended to a significant extent with a significant amount of money that's being expended if it were to be allowed to be interpreted this way. The judge in Texas even said that this would be the most expansive usurpation of legislative authority by the executive branch if it were to proceed, because the sheer dollar figure is beyond anything that could be contemplated by interpreting a statute that at the time never thought that this would be the use of it, and suddenly that's the interpretation of it. So I think you're right. I think that the DOJ and the administration knew that this was a very tenuous argument, but wanted to fulfill that campaign promise in some way.
Yeah, and it worked in that sense. All right, Katie, thank you. Always good seeing you, my friend. Katie Cherkasky on those developments here.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.